I'm Jerry Gordon, senior editor at the New English Review, and I'm here for what is the fifth in a series of sit reps on the conflict in Gaza between Israel and Hamas, which, as each day goes by, seems to expand to the greater Middle East region with activities in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, the Red Sea with the Houthi rebels, and the question of Iranian vessels essentially tracking through the Suez Canal. Now, that they may be permitted to do, as Israeli frigates have done prior to that, but it also is a dangerous move that we have to watch. Having said that, let's deal with some of the emerging issues that have become evident in this conflict. And the first and most dominant one is what's behind the IDF releasing reserves and downscaling the conflict with Hamas and Gaza.
That is a great question, Jerry. It's a pleasure to be with you. Allow me to begin by asking Hashem's blessing on Israel, on the Jewish community worldwide, on the IDF, who are fighting for all of us against evil, against the Amalekites, if I may, and on those who have been taken hostage and their families. May Hashem bless them, give them strength, and ultimately lead them to victory against the Amalekites, the Hamas and the Iranians of the world. Back to your question, which is obviously a topical question, but it's an important question. It shows what's going on right now, and it is very revealing. Well, why release the reserves? As we know, up to 220,000 IDF reservists on average since early October have been activated and are fighting in Gaza. I think that the unit particulars were 5 brigades were released to go back home or somewhere else. They don't say exactly where they're going to go. They said they're not going to fight in Gaza anymore. Many of them will go home. The economy is suffering from the lack of workers, especially in the high-tech industry, and a lot of these reservists, they're not uneducated street dwellers. They're working in the high-tech industry, in finance, and in artificial intelligence, in agriculture, which is also high-tech. Being Israel, agriculture is a very high-tech industry. So these are very important people for the Israeli economy. So many of them will go back to their jobs and their families. And that's wonderful for Israel because they need to continue to exist. Resilience is not just a mantra for Israel. They have to be resilient because that country depends on resilience, economic resilience. So that'll happen. But some of them are going to be deployed to the north. And we don't know. They haven't talked about it. Thank goodness. They've got good security. But we can expect that at least some of these reservists will go to positions in the north, and they may rotate out with the reservists who've been already activated to the north. And that's good because they need to be able to defend against the threats from the north. The other thing that they're going to do is they're going to take some of their equipment, which they've been used now for almost 3 months straight, and pull it out, send it to refit it all, repair it, replace it. And not only that, they're going to replace equipment that's now been shown to be not as useful as some of the high-tech weapons that they have. They're going to replace some of the equipment with more high-tech weapons. And this has been it's not a proving ground that the IDF would have asked for, but you take opportunities where you can. They've fielded new drones. They fielded new weapons to combat in tunnels. This is not the last time that the IDF is going to have to fight in tunnels. Not only in Gaza, but in the Judea and Samaria as well. And who knows if they're going to confront that with Hezbollah? They might. But it's a technology of fighting in the tunnels that they have developed as it goes. So they're going to put new weapon systems into the IDF. That's a good thing. And they're also going to just allow the troops a chance to rest. They need some downtime. Some of these soldiers have been fighting for 3 months. They get weary. So I think those are the main reasons. I think they're related to the operational need. And I know that the U.S. has been saying, oh, you want to downsize, you want to stop the general fight. My impression is Israel is going to carry this through. They're not interested in stopping. They're going to eliminate Hamas. They're going to put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages, and they're going to clean out Gaza. I think that's still on track.
With over 500 IDF fallen and more than 3,500 injured, how does that compare with a toll, for example, in the 18-day October 73 conflict? Further, how severe have been the injuries and the number of IDF fallen, particularly with regard to, unfortunately, friendly fire?
A great question, and the quantified answer is that this has been much less than the Yom Kippur War. In the Yom Kippur War in 1973, there were approximately 2,500, between 2,500 and 2,800 killed in action, and another 7,500 or so, 75 to 8,000 wounded. So a huge number, as one might expect from that generation's combat operations, full-scale combat arms operations. The war right now, we're seeing just those who have been in combat, not those who were killed in the initial assault, which is another 200 or 300, but killed in combat since October 7th has been 172 killed in action, and several hundred wounded, and that we shouldn't forget that, because they come home without with limbs missing, traumatic brain injuries, just like any soldier in high intensity combat. There are going to be a generation or two of war wounded in Israel that they're going to have to take care of, and we shouldn't forget, because we have our own situation in the United States. Those who came home from Iraq and Afghanistan are still recovering and may never get well. So the IDF soldiers that have fought for us there are going to come home, and they will be recovering for the rest of their lives. But back to the comparison with Yom Kippur War, so you can see the number is much less, which isn't to say that it's better, because a lot of the war wounded that were killed in Yom Kippur War, the reason they died was because they didn't have the kind of medical care that they have in the Gaza war. What the IDF calls operational casualties have unfortunately they've happened as well. The IDF says, and we have no reason to doubt their statistics, so far 29 operational casualties in Gaza. Of those 29, 20 are friendly fire, either direct fire, 18 direct fire. In other words, one soldier missing or erroneously targeting another soldier, but then there's two which are so-called deviation of fire. And I just tell you from artillery, I used to be in the artillery, you miss sometimes, you miscalculate, and that's what they're talking about with deviation of fire. The fire they thought that was going to be a good target, and it just went awry. Now there've also been four operational casualties outside of Gaza, two in the northern front and two in the central front, or two in the northern command and two in the central command. So the northern command, you can see how that's happening with all the missiles that are coming across the border. Central command, I don't know this, but I suspect they're talking about military operations in Judea and Samaria. There have continued to be PLO attacks and PA operate. We don't want to say the PA is an aggressor, but I don't know what the difference between the PA is and Hamas in Judea and Samaria. They kind of work together.
But
So
there are
that's,
also Hamas in West Bank.
yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Now, why has the Biden Defense Department ordered the return of the USS Gerald Ford carrier battle group to Virginia, particularly in the face of continuing Iran-backed proxy Yemeni rebel drone and missile attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea strategic maritime choke point? Now, Iran is sending a destroyer right through the Suez Canal. Why is this action by the administration going on when it appears that there seems to be a broadening of the war in the region?
Along the lines of why the IDF is withdrawing 5 brigades from Gaza,
Yep.
when it looks as if that fight is continuing, and it is, the USS Gerald Ford battle group has been at sea for 8 months. That's a long time. And they didn't plan, obviously there was no prior coordination with Hamas and the United States Navy, so the Navy just sent the Gerald Ford because it was in the Med, and they thought that'd be the right thing to do to show a strong signal to the region that the United States had Israel's back, and it did. So the primary mission was a show of force and a show of support for Israel. Mission accomplished. Now, there are other missions that have evolved since that, notably the Houthi attacks on Red Sea. But the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea and the Iranian frigate, which is now in the region, are primarily not the responsibility, or were not the responsibility of Gerald Ford. Primary responsibility for Iranian vessels in that area, the USS Eisenhower, which is deployed in the Persian Gulf, which conducts both aerial patrols and also has the command and control of the U.S. Navy ships in the Red Sea. So the task force, the battle group of the USS Eisenhower in Persian Gulf is really got the mission of this growing threat from the Houthis, and including the deployment of a U.S. or an Iranian ship to the region. What are the reasons why they'd want to deploy a carrier there? Again, force, show of force, to prepare for any potential operations, especially in the Levant, notably Lebanon, if something went awry with Hezbollah. Are they going to need to deploy other forces there? Probably, especially if it goes south with Hezbollah. But they can. I don't think there's a diminution of combat potential for the United States Navy by sending the USS Gerald Ford back to its home port in Norfolk. In fact, I think what it's going to do is allow the USS Gerald Ford to swap out with another carrier, an Atlantic Fleet carrier or a Fifth Fleet carrier. It could be that may be a part of the process, and the U.S. Navy is not going to announce that in advance. They'll do it as they need to. Let's hope that this issue with Hezbollah doesn't get to the point where they're going to have to fly sorties against Hezbollah, but they might have to. And I have no doubt the Navy could handle that particular. But it's going to allow, just like with the IDF soldiers, Navy Navy personnel on board the carrier battle group Ford and their accompanying ships. They've been at sea for 8 months. They need to go home. They need to, as the Navy says, chop out so that they're not deployed in combat right now. And anybody who's been on a ship, anybody who's been on a ship knows you get tired of just being on a ship. These guys need a break. So it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Okay, speaking about the northern border for Israel, there's an intense series of border exchanges with Hezbollah and air attacks against IRGC and Iraq militia proxies in Syria, while the U.S. doesn't appear to be retaliating for attacks on our troops in Iraq. Is the Biden administration fearful that such actions will further the reality of a larger regional war with Iran?
Yes, they are. And I think the Biden administration has part of their calculation is how much can we retaliate against these provocations without sparking a wider war? Understandably, from their perspective, they're more afraid of a wider war than they are of actually taking the losses that they're taking. Hezbollah has ramped up their attacks. They haven't decreased their attacks. Hezbollah is threatening even wider warfare in Lebanon and along the northern border with Israel. The Houthis aren't stopping. Iran has sent a ship to support the Houthis in the Red Sea. It doesn't look like our deterrence is working. There's no evidence to show that the attack in Iran, in Kerman, at the tomb of Soleimani, was an Israeli operation. It looks as if it was an ISIS operation because they don't like Iran either. But I don't think Israel is crying about that, but I don't think they need to be. They're not to blame. And the U.S. actually has said that in public. It's not us, not the U.S., and we know it's not Israel. They probably know from SIGINT that it's ISIS, and in fact, that's the most likely culprit. But the operation to kill the Hamas terrorist, Al-Arouri, that's no doubt that's an Israeli operation. So there are still going to be things that have the potential to ramp this up. But you have to ask the question, when you see these operations, you see these developments, what's really missing here is any serious level of deterrence by the United States. Anything. What are we doing that's deterring Iran? What are we doing that's deterring the Houthis, much less its supporter, Iran? What are we doing that's deterring Hezbollah? I mean, that's the missing ingredient here. I don't think very much at all. So I think what we're looking at this point is Hamas. I mean, we have to remember behind all of this is Iran, all of it. Iran is the end of the beginning and end of all this. Their tentacles include Hamas, as evil as they are, but they're not. It's like trying to attack a body-wide illness and focusing on what's the pain in your arm. Hamas is just the extension of Iran. Do we need to go after Hamas till the end? Is Israel doing that? Yes, thank goodness. But the real goal is to hurt Iran. So we're not doing that. We're not hurting Iran.
Former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett revealed Israeli secret attacks on Iran during his year in office as Prime Minister. He was subsequently chastised, if you want to call it that, or he had a slap on the wrist from Prime Minister Netanyahu for violating security protocols. So what message was Bennett trying to convey, not only to Israeli, but U.S. national echelons about taking initiatives against Iran's expanding nuclear aspirations, regional hegemony, and global alliances?
Naftali Bennett is a skilled politician, but more important, he is a soldier. He served in the IDF in a special operations unit fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon almost 20 years ago. And he did a great job. And then he got out of the army and became a high-tech entrepreneur. And he did a great job at that. And then he was the prime minister for a year. And he did a pretty good job as the prime minister for a year, with a lot of back and forth in the Israeli political world. I personally think that the reason he did this was to show that Iran is the goal here and not just pinpricks across the border, but Iran is behind this, and we've got to hurt Iran. And he was trying to show, as you say, both to a domestic Israeli audience as to the United States and the world, that Iran is the engine for all this maliciousness, and that he personally was involved as the prime minister and attacking them, and that's where we should be going. It's like pointing a laser pointer at Tehran. Hey, don't forget, these are the guys behind all this. I think he probably coordinated that with the government in advance, and that's why they said, yeah, we gotta slap him on the wrist, but it's not serious. He's doing the mission of a responsible Israeli statesman by saying, you know, we're in an existential war here, and the focus is trying to hurt Iran. I don't think the U.S. gets that yet. And if they do, they're not acting on it. And I think it was really productive for Bennett to put that in I think it was the Wall Street Journal,
Right.
that to show, hey, our decision-making process to date has missed the fact that we've got to hurt Iran in this. These are the people that are really responsible. I thought it was very effective. I'm, you know, anytime as a soldier, I get concerned anytime somebody reveals secrets because, well, it's just not something that we want to do. But sometimes it has to be judiciously done. And if it had the approval, and I think it probably did, at least some people in the war cabinet, what they're trying to do is refocus U.S. attention. Turn on your laser pointer, focus on Iran. Let's establish some deterrence here.
One comment I can make historically is back in 1988, when we had a different regime politically here in the U.S., we also had a confrontation with Iran. It was called Operation Praying Mantis. And Praying Mantis attacked oil platforms held by the Iranians and other vessels. There were some unfortunate aspects of it with the shoot down of an Iranian airliner by a U.S. vessel. But it demonstrated essentially that when you undertake pointed, abrupt actions against an adversary, that they pull back because they don't know what's coming in terms of the untoward aspects of essentially your capabilities. And I think that's the additional message that is conveyed to whatever White House is going to be in existence in 2024, that is, if you don't undertake strategic pinpoint opportunities to push back with measured violence against the Iranians, you're not going to succeed.
We don't have their attention.
We don't.
Right now. We don't have their attention. And in fact, it was in Bennett's article in the New York Times or in the Wall Street Journal. He's much as said so. He said when these two attacks that he talked about in 2022,
right?
Iran, they woke up because when you attack them at home, hurt them at home, they get timid. Oh, they're real bold and out there when you're not attacking them at home because they have no stake. There's no skin in the game for them. They can say that. Does anybody seriously think they care about the lives of Houthis in Yemen? No, they don't care. They're expendable. That's why they're giving them all these. It's like giving. Okay, you get fireworks in the hands of thugs. They're just going to blow their hands up, and that's what the Houthis are doing. Iran doesn't care about them. They don't care about Hamas. They care about Iran. And if we hurt Iran at home, like Operation Praying Mantis, take out their oil platforms. What a great idea. Attack them at home like Naftali Bennett did. What a great idea. Iran is vulnerable if we attack them at home. They're not if we attack their proxies. Bennett knows that. The nightmare is, and that's why Israel is having to really extend itself. We should not forget, Israel is fighting for us. They're on the front line of our shared civilization. And Iran is the one behind they're behind the attack. Israel, do we want Israel? They've got their hands full with Hamas and with Hezbollah. Why do we want Israel going after Iran at home? I don't think so. I think we, the United States, that's where we need to step up and help out. It's our fight too.
All right, we were talking earlier about the spectacular drone strike by Israel in Hezbollah-controlled South Beirut that took out senior Hamas political council leader Salah Al-Arouri and 6 others. How important was Al-Arouri as Hamas terrorist planner? And what was it illustrative of regarding Israel's determination to hunt down and destroy Hamas senior leadership? And as I said earlier, it's not lost on a lot of us that the Hamas, not Hamas, but the Mossad director made a point of saying, after this event occurred, we are not going to stop.
Well, that's a really great question because it points out that this war is on the part of Israel. It is a war, an existential war, and the state of Israel is being attacked on all sides. And they've, one of the terms that we use in our country is the whole of government approach. Well, they're doing the whole of government approach too. So the IDF has the major combat operations role, but fortunately, Shabak, or the Internal Security Service in Israel, and Mossad, which is their external security force, are fully involved too. And we're not going to hear much about what Shabak is doing because, well, that's the way it is with internal security. And we're not going to watch about what Mossad does unless they make a very pointed announcement, as they did after this assassination of Al-Arouri in Lebanon. We're not going to stop. They won't. They said in mid-October, the government said, we will find these people and we will kill them. And they're doing that. So the next time something happens, it'll probably happen suddenly. There won't be any prior notice because that would be stupid. But this was a surprise to the world because it was well executed. They killed Al-Arouri. Now, he himself is a pretty significant character within the terrorist structure. He's been on the front lines of the terrorist structure since the 80s. He was one of the founding members of Hamas. He also was the commander, most recently, the commander of the Al-Qassam brigade military force of Hamas. He was the commanding officer of Hamas forces in Judea and Samaria, so the West Bank. He's a frequent visitor to Iran. He's seen to be a liaison between Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. No doubt that he is. He was in Lebanon and in the Hamas area, or the terrorist area of Beirut, which is kind of a closed place in Beirut. They found out where they've been tracking him for some time. They found out he was going to be spending the night in a certain place, and they skillfully sent a drone in to assassinate him. I'm sure this won't be the last. They're reluctant probably to conduct assassination targeted killing approaches in Qatar. They're probably reluctant to do it in Egypt for all kinds of reasons. But Lebanon, they just did it, and they'll do it again. If somebody from Hamas goes there, they'll attack them. The other thing that is important to remember about Al-Arouri is, it's hard to know his role in October 7th, but it's impossible to think that happened without his complete cooperation and planning. That's what he does. He's a killer.
Viewers should realize that he was the principal trigger for the war with Hamas in 2014. He orchestrated the kidnapping of 4 yeshiva students in Israel who were found subsequently dead. And that so outraged the Israelis to essentially initiate the 50-day war that occurred in 2014. A lot of us were instrumental in holding rallies in support of Israel at that point in time. But that's how dastardly he was. And he had his agents masqueraded as Haredi Jews to essentially capture these yeshiva students. And I recall at least 1 or 2 of them were Americans. Not lost on a lot of us at that time. So this man was pretty deadly at that point in time. And essentially, it was a dual victory for Israel in terms of taking him out.
He's in the right place right now, and not in this world.
Exactly. After this event occurred, Hamas said, all bets are off in terms of any backdoor discussions about future or hostage exchanges, given what's occurred. How real is that? And do you think that behind the scenes there is still activity going on in terms of obtaining hostage releases?
Well, this is having watched this particular operation, but several others before this. The government of Israel is not going to stop trying to negotiate for release of the hostages. They're going to still press to find a way to do that. I don't think that Hamas, unless they get a pass on this, and I don't see that happening, Israel's going to continue to put pressure. Hamas is going to continue to try to find a way to take advantage of the situation. So we got both protagonist and the antagonist. They may or may not, we don't know what's going on under the table, but there's work going on under the table with negotiators that are willing to step in, like the United States, like Qatar, like Egypt, countries that, either want to be helpful or at least get involved in an unhelpful way. But Israel is not going to stop trying to negotiate for the release of the hostages. And frankly, Hamas, depending on how close they are to being destroyed, and they're getting closer every day, is not going to stop negotiating either. So we expect the negotiations to go on, and we won't know the state of the negotiations, which again are being, on the side of Israel, they're being led by Mossad.
Right.
I think Mossad has a well-deserved reputation for secrecy. They're not going to announce what they're doing. So I think the negotiations are going to continue. The prospects for them may wax and wane, but I think they're exploring all the options all the time. It doesn't go away. It's also not because of internal dissension in Israeli domestic politics. The question is, how much noise is that going to create? How much distraction are Israeli domestic politics going to create for the government's plan to destroy Hamas and release the hostages? Israeli domestic politics, God bless the families of the hostages. Of course, they want their loved ones to come home. Nobody wants anything other than hostages to come home. But putting pressure on the Israeli government to release the hostages, they don't have the hostages. Hamas has the hostages. So all the efforts need to be focused on putting pressure on Hamas. It brings up another point that I think is worth mentioning. What's the Red Cross doing here? We've heard the Red Cross bandied about as some actor in all this. That's all they've done so far is just create confusion and noise. The Red Cross has representatives in Israel who know and have contact with the Israeli government. What are they doing with Hamas? Are they doing anything with Hamas? And
are they doing, for example, proof of life of where these hostages are? Are they visiting these hostages to see what their medical needs are? As a number of them are pretty elderly, and I'm sure living off of essentially medications that were vital to their existence. I don't see any activities from the International Red Cross doing this.
I think they're on their backs. I see, of course, we don't have a window into it, but there doesn't appear to be any movement on the part of the Red Cross, as you say, to establish proof of life as a minimum. But we also don't see any efforts on the part of the United Nations to put pressure on Hamas. They curry favor with Hamas. And the UN Relief Works Agency, that's a part of the UN. I guess we're supposed to presume. The UNRWA, UN Relief Works Agencies, is in bed with Hamas, complicit with Hamas. Where are they? Are they trying to help the situation except by being complicit with Hamas? I don't think so. So the pressure from international agencies doesn't appear to be on Hamas. It appears to be all focused on Israel, as if Israel was the cause of this. Israel's doing its best to defend itself.
It's interesting. There was a report saying that the estimated number of Hamas fighters left in Gaza is somewhere between 7 and 10,000, as I recall a piece of information. And it reminded me essentially of the high point of the first Lebanon War of '82. A good friend of mine, Ken Timmerman, was actually a hostage at that point in time of the PLO. It's written about it. But that was when the IDF completely surrounded Yasser Arafat and the PLO forces in Beirut. And they were offered exile in Tunisia. How realistic is a similar possible deal for remaining senior Hamas officials and fighters in Gaza?
I think it doesn't appear to be on the immediate horizon, but I can't imagine it's not being discussed. I mean, the only thing I really believe that Hamas gets it, they're going to die. If they stay, if the situation continues as it's going now, all the Hamas leadership is going to die. So mortality has a way of focusing your future action, no matter who you are. And so I can't imagine that it hasn't at least crossed the leadership of Hamas in Gaza's mind that maybe there's some way we can get our skins out of this. And so I think it would be foolish for the Israelis not to at least consider that prospect, although I suspect they would be reluctant to do that. If they could end the rockets coming towards the border communities, if they could get Hamas leadership, the scum of the earth, to go to another side of the earth without continuing this killing, which is killing Israeli soldiers, it's killing Israelis at home, it's killing Palestinians. If they could figure out a way to get the scum of the earth out of Gaza and stop the war, they would probably at least take a look at that prospect. So I think they're probably considering it. I think it's going to be hard to do, not just because they're never going to stop hating each other, but that wasn't the deal with the PLO either. They went right back to what they were doing. It bought some time. It disorganized them. It made Yasser Arafat a world publicity figure. I remember the photographs of him leaving and, "Oh, I'll see you later." I remember that. It was quite the celebration on the part of the PLO and Yasser Arafat. But it worked, at least for a time. And I think this time it's going to be more complete. The destruction is going to be more complete. But again, I don't see it immediately on the horizon, but I can't imagine it's not at least being taken a look at.
So, having said all that, what are the realistic options for Gaza post-war? Should Hamas's infrastructure and leadership be destroyed? Big if, I might add. Is it denazification of the surviving population, whatever that means? Resettlement, which I gather is a flashpoint for the rest of the world? Establishment of a perimeter buffer zone? Or a new state for Palestinians carved out of the Sinai?
All of those are possible, but only once the situation on the ground has changed. And the situation on the ground will change when Hamas is destroyed, which will happen. And then people will have to agree, they'll have to recalculate because the situation won't be what it is today. It won't be what it was on October 7th. It'll be whatever it is in June or July when Hamas is destroyed. And you're absolutely right to refer to all the infrastructure damage, which is already massive. It's going to have to be rebuilt in some way. Who will rebuild it? Everything right now is just, John Adams' guess and Jerry Gordon's guess. We're reasonably intelligent people, and we can postulate what might or might not happen. But again, the situation on the ground will be different in a few months than it is now. But yeah, somebody's going to rebuild it. Gaza's not going to be abandoned. It's not going to be a black hole in the planet. There will be a rebuilding. I think most likely there will be a multinational force deployed there. I guess I hope it's not the United States, but it might be. It might be mostly Arab. It might be. We don't know yet. I don't know. Those discussions are taking place in secret. and by people that we don't know. They're not on the press. They're our CIA, they're Israeli Mossad, there are other people involved. Hopefully not Thomas Friedman, because we already know he's not productive, from the New York Times. But hopefully smart, productive, intelligent people have already begun to engage on that. And also hopefully it won't be, I'm sorry, but I don't want Kamala Harris involved in those discussions either. I don't think it would be productive. But I think that people who are smart and resourceful and have the ability to make things happen are doing this all behind the scenes. There's going to have to be a plan for infrastructure. There's going to have to be a plan for security. Israel is not going to walk away and just say, yeah, we're going to let it all come up again. But it'll have to be a responsible, resourceful, effective international force that comes in there and takes care of Gaza and protects its population, whatever that's going to be, and rebuilds the territory.
Final observation question. Is Israel and the West essentially faced with a never-ending civilizational war with extremist Islamic jihadism?
Yes, I don't think this will ever be over. It started in 732, and it's been going on now for 1,500 years. You could actually say it started in the time when the Israelites escaped Egypt. They were pursued by Amalek and Amalekites, and they knew then that there were always going to be Amalekites on their tail, killing people, looking for the weak and those who were trailing the Israelites as they were walking into the Sinai. They were there then. Maybe not the same ethnic people, but the kind of people that preys on the weak and kills those that they can. These are modern day Amalekites. They'll never stop. And we can always expect to do that. So Israel has the right idea. They're going to have to protect themselves. We don't have the right idea. We've been very helpful to Israel, thank goodness. It's to our credit to the extent that we've actually had Israel's back. We had the people of Israel, the Jewish people's back in World War II. Thank God. We made mistakes, but on the whole, we ended the Nazi empire, and that was good. And we're facing a new Nazi empire, Islamic fundamentalism. And I don't think that's ever going to go away completely. They may change and morph into some other situation. We're always going to have to be on our guard. We can't not be on our guard. We've got to look to those Amalekites who are always going to rise up. Getting back to this current situation, though, is a little bit more easy to identify who the Amalekites are. They're Iran. Iran is behind this. And until we deal with Iran, until we confront Iran, just like Naftali Bennett wrote in the Wall Street Journal, until we deal with the threat of Iran, we're not going to solve the problem. It's always going to be there. Iran, Iran, Iran. That's what we need to focus on right now.
Well, another brilliant discussion with our friend, General John Adams, has just concluded. Amazing similarities over what? 3,000 plus years, essentially a relentless enemy of the Jewish people, emerging every generation that must be confronted and destroyed. Hitler during World War II, now it's the Ayatollahs of Iran trying to orchestrate the destruction of the hated Jewish enemies. They are as you appropriately said, the Amalekites. And for that, General, I want to thank you and end this discussion. And hopefully the next one will demonstrate the wisdom of what we have talked about in 5 SITREP episodes. Thank you.
Jerry, thank you. Great questions. May Hashem bless the people of Israel.
Amen. And alavai, it should only be.